You asked for it. You got it. Don't go away. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fat Guy Productions. I am Paul, coming to you as always from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. And yeah, I asked you in my community tab. Here, hold up. In my community tab. What is a community tab? I don't think a lot of you know what the community tab is, so I'm going to tell you about it. If you go to my YouTube channel's main page, at the top there's a little bit of tabs where you can click on videos, shorts, things like that, and one of the tabs is community, and it's like YouTube's version of Facebook. I can post messages there, I can put polls up or pictures or all sorts of stuff. It's a really important part of my channel. It's where when I do giveaways, I post the winners, and I post what I'm giving away, and I post questions or comments, or I ask for advice. So that's the community tab, and I posted on the community tab a question to you all. I wanted to start another model, and I asked you, would you rather see me do a P-51 or a Sherman tank? Well, overwhelmingly, I don't think the Sherman tank got a single vote. Everybody wanted to see a P-51, so we're going to build a P-51. Let's get to work. So today we're going to be building the Mighty 8th Special Edition Prophy Pack from Eduard. It's a 1/48 scale Prophy Pack, and it's of the P-51, and this is going to be fun. I really wanted to do a P-51 specifically because I wanted to try my hand at a metal finish, so that's why I chose this. But now, while we're taking a look at the kit, and that's the first thing I would tell you to do, is make sure you get the lay of the land, okay? Go through all of the kit and the instructions and everything. Make sure you fully understand what you're about to get yourself into and lay out some kind of a plan. But while I'm doing that, I want to talk about Eduard. I love these kits. Okay, this is my 4th Eduard aircraft kit, and they've all been Prophy packs, and I love these things. And look, if I don't know if they do other things besides aircraft. I've only done 4 aircraft kits from them, but the castings are always so detailed and beautiful. The fit and finish is amazing. And I just love everything about them. And with the Prophy packs, you get masks for the canopies. You get a myriad of decals, so you can do any number of liveries on this thing. This particular kit came with resin parts, wheels, and exhaust manifolds. So that's really cool. And my favorite, colored photo etch. Now, I want to show you this. Look at this sheet of decals here, okay? It's because they offer you, 5, 6 something versions that you can build the kit in. And it's important that before you start, you determine what version you're going to build, because they're usually on slightly different aircraft models, and there will be variances in the build as you go along. So you kind of need to pick what airplane you're going to build before you get started. But man, they sure do give you some options here. So I'm familiar with the kit. I have a basic plan in my brain. I know what I'm doing. It's time to get to work. And all of these kits almost exclusively begin with work on the cockpit. So we're going to go ahead and start pulling parts. Now, when I was a young model maker, I was not a cutter. I was a twister, bender, snapper. But I'm telling you, cut the parts off the sprues, form good habits. It'll pay off in the long run. And to do that, I always love to use my Tamiya cutters. And these things are really sharp, pointy, and have a very flat side, so it makes it very easy to get an accurate, clean cut and get the parts off that you need. Now, just remember, don't take off any more than you have to take off to begin with, but go through, get the parts that you're going to need for the step that you're on, and then put them all in a nice, safe place, and go ahead and start cleaning everything up. For cleanup, an X-Acto knife is my go-to tool. I can cut away anything that needs to be cut away. I can scrape or do whatever, but don't sell yourself short on files or sanding sticks. Now, for this build, I'm going to be using essentially 3 different glues. I'm going to be using Tamiya thin cement. I'm going to be using Tamiya quick drying thin cement, and I'm going to be using my gel control CA glue. Now, honestly, cement is or glue or anything like that. Those are misnomers. These are solvents, and what they're doing is they're melting the plastic. It briefly melts it. They squish together. They harden back up, and now they're kind of melded into one piece. The nice thing about this glue is it's very neat. It's easy to apply. You know, it's the way to go. So I'm pretty much going to be using the Tamiya thin throughout the build. If I do something unique, I'll let you know as we go. Once things are glued together, we can go ahead and start painting the interior of the cockpit. I'm just using a cockpit green by Tamiya, and just brush painting it on because, hey, these airplanes were not perfect. They weren't run through a paint shop and given a beautiful paint job, okay? It was usually some mechanic on the flight line with a bucket of paint and a paintbrush, so don't sweat it. Now, for my build, I tend to like to pre-plan and build as much as possible before painting. That way I get a nice, consistent, cohesive paint job. Sometimes you have to kind of paint as you go, but that's not what I prefer. I do as much painting as I can whenever possible. And although I told you the word glue is a misnomer, I'm going to keep calling it gluing. So when you're gluing stuff together, it's really important you do test fitting. Make sure you fully understand how the parts are going to go together, where the glue needs to go, all of that. Make sure everything's ready before you start applying the cement. One of the things I love the best about these Eduard kits in the Profi packs is the colored photo etch. Look at the seatbelts in there. By the time you're done building one of these, the interior is so detailed and so cool looking, and it makes you look like a master modeler. And it really is all about the kit and I just love it. It's almost a shame sometimes that you have to tuck those interiors away inside the fuselage, but hey, it is what it is. Now, Eduard molded in some detail to the walls of the aircraft itself, but for the most part, everything is on these little glue-in pieces. So you get them cut off and trimmed and cleaned, you paint them, and then they get festooned with photo etch and all this other stuff. And let me tell you something, this kit comes with a pretty hefty amount of really tiny photo etch. After all, this is a 1/48 scale model, so the photo etch is a little bit tiny. But again, I pick and choose, okay? I don't always use every piece of photo etch because, in my opinion, some of it is just too small and ridiculous to even fight with. But I've got pretty much everything for the interior done, and here you see I've got the fuselage halves, and I'm painting just with a brush, cockpit color, everywhere you might be able to see into the fuselage. So I'm just brush painting all that on. I'll do it on both sides and then set that aside to dry before I glue all of this stuff inside of it. All right, so I've got the details for the inside walls of the cockpit glued in, and now I can go ahead and get the interior put in. And what I'm going to tell you here is test fit, and then test fit again. If you think you've test fitted enough, you haven't. Okay, because once you glue this into one half of the cockpit, when you try to bring the two sides of the fuselage together, it can be really difficult to get everything to line up just right. And if it doesn't line up just right, you're going to have a hard time with the fuselage, you're going to have seam lines and all this other stuff that you've got to deal with. So know what you're doing. Once you've got that down pat, then you can go ahead and put the interior into one side, glue it down, and let it dry. Okay, so I have been working my way around both halves of the fuselage, gluing and holding pieces together, and I just do it a little bit at a time. You see I've got the nose taped. I would caution you to make sure that there's no wet glue there before you put the tape down, otherwise it's going to make a mess. But once it's kind of set, you can use it to just keep things together, or you can use rubber bands or something like that. But always make sure the glue has the cement, forgive me, has kind of settled and dried before you start putting tape down. Once everything is together and you're happy with it, then you can start to remove that tape and address any seam lines. Now, just remember, not every seam line needs to be removed, okay? These airplanes were built out of a lot of panels that were welded and riveted together, so just understand what needs to be where so you don't just go frivolously sanding away something that should be there. Anyhow, we've got it all together. We're going to use sanding sticks and sanding sponges and kind of sand away any imperfections and make sure everything is looking just right on the fuselage. All right, now we can turn our attention to the wing assemblies. And not only do we have the wings, but we also have to worry about the landing gear bay. You've got to build the entire landing gear bay, and that gives you some really nice details down in there. Of course, you can add other things like lead wires and stuff like that and really beef it up. But I think this kit is going to be enough for me the way it is, and I'm really not going to go crazy with super detailing and stuff. I'm going to kind of pretty much build this kit as it comes, and that should be enough for me. All right, so I've got the wing lights in, I've got the landing gear bays glued in, everything is looking good. And now we can go ahead and take and fit the wing to the fuselage. And I'm going to tell you more about it here in just a second. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was difficult. It may have been me, but I had problems with it, and I'll tell you about it here after I just talk about what I'm doing. Right now, I'm just painting the landing gear bays chromatic yellow. I'm just using testers. I thinned it down and just airbrushing it in there. And by painting it later, I make sure that I get everything that could possibly be visible. So I'm hitting it from every angle. I'm not worrying about overspray because we'll fill this and prime the body later. But anyhow, what I was saying about getting these wings on is usually these Eduard kits, you snap the wings on and there is almost no seam lines, at least nothing that shouldn't be there. And that was the case with this kit, except there were some places where you really needed to kind of apply a little bit of pressure as you were gluing and drying. I was using the Tamiya quick setting cement to make it a little easier on myself. But in the end, I ended up with a gap on the left side of the aircraft that I was really hating on, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. All right, so now we can go ahead and turn our attention to some of the photo etch. And I gotta tell you, I'm not a friend of photo etch, but in these Profi packs, the colored photo etch for doing the dashboards and stuff like that, oh my gosh, they make you look like a model building genius. I love this stuff. Now, in case this isn't your thing and it's not the way you want to go, they give you all the plastic pieces and decals you need to do your cockpit the old-fashioned way, if that's what you want to do. But man, the Profi Pack stuff is so good and so amazing. I love using it for cockpits. Okay, so I've got the canopy masked off and glued on temporarily using just a little bit of Elmer's white glue so I can take it off easily later. I also have used some foam to fill in the landing gear bays, and I'm getting ready to paint the entire aircraft using AK's Extreme Metal paints. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to run into a major snag. Okay, a major snag. Now, I already told you about the little gap in the left wing root. That's just one of the problems. There are problems. There are things going wrong that I'm unaware of. I forgot to mask off the little wing lights. That's going to bother me. That wing root. And so far, the AK metal paints are going on beautifully and looking fantastic. But trust me when I tell you, I'm going to screw this up, okay? I'm going to screw it up bad. But right now, it's going on and it's looking fabulous. And I'm just using polished aluminum here. And then I'm using just aluminum for like the control surfaces, all the flaps and rudders and stuff like that. Those are getting a different paint. So it's just subtle, but that's what's happening. So anyhow, we're going to get this paint on here and let it dry. And then we'll move on to where I really hit a snag. So to make this more stable and give me a nice smooth surface, I'm using this AK Gloss Clear. I'm going to clear coat this entire thing. Now, one of two things could have happened. It was either that I should have thinned this, or I noticed I was having some problems with my airbrush, and I think it was just too dirty and it was clogged, and this was not going on well, okay? This was not going on well at all. I was getting a weird texture in some places. When I was trying to get the airbrush to flow better, I'd pull the trigger back too much and I'd put too much on, and I'd get a runny spot that I'd have to try and blow out with just air. And basically, I am killing this model with this gloss varnish. It came out terrible. And when it dried, I looked at it and I tried to sand it and see if I could fix it that way. But, you don't want to sand away all the details. It was just awful, and I didn't think I could live with it. All right, well, it's break time. And why is it break time? Well, because I need to show you something. This is not a good thing, but I need to show you something. It's another Eduard P-51 model kit, brand new in the box. Why am I showing you this? Well, because of this. So look, if you look, you can see why I'm redoing it. I mean, look how bad that paint finish is. It's all lumpy and textury. It just looks like complete garbage. So here's what happened. No. Before I get into what happened, let me tell you. It's easy for us YouTubers to make these videos and make ourselves look like we have all the answers, like we know everything. Well, I don't know everything. I don't know a lot of stuff. I am far from an expert model builder. I have some skills and I have some knowledge. I have some things I know how to do, but I am way not an expert model builder. Case in point. But it would be easy to pawn myself off as one. And there's a lot of videos I make where I've made mistakes, but I choose to leave them out because there's nothing important there. But I have a lesson that I want to share with you that revolves around this mess. So here's the scoop. You're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. If you're in model building or diecast cars or whatever it is that you're into, you're going to make mistakes. I really just screwed the pooch on this one. And you're going to make mistakes. And the thing is, how are you going to deal with those? So I wanted to show you this mistake and talk about it and share some ideas on how you could deal with the mistakes that you inevitably are going to make. It's easy enough. The quickest, easiest way is to just wash your hands of it, walk away and say, screw that, I'm done. No. In my opinion, no. If that's what you want to do, that's fine, but I don't think that's the right move. You don't grow, you don't learn, you don't benefit. But it is a choice. Another way you could deal with it is to look at the problem and tackle it. How can I fix this problem? Well, one way I could have done and fixed this would be to sand this. It would have been a lot of sanding, and I would have lost all the details in the aircraft. So I didn't think that was a viable solution. But that is one way you can deal with your mistake, is to just tackle it head on. Think of a way to solve the problem and go for it. Another perfectly acceptable way is to live with it. I could have kept this model going, finished it up, and lived with the results. So you can live with it. I don't think that's the answer either. Really don't. You can toss the whole thing, start over. It's a lot of work. I don't necessarily know that that is the way either. Or you can do what I'm going to do here, which is, I'm just going to go backwards a bit. So I bought a new kit. I tore this airplane apart because I wanted to get to my cockpit and my my instrument panel. I wanted to get these pieces out of here, my detail pieces for inside the cockpit. You know, all the stuff that could be saved, I wanted to get to that. So I wouldn't have to go back and do everything all over again. To do that, I had to kind of tear this airplane to pieces. And now I'm going to throw it away, and I'm going to learn from my mistakes, and I'm going to press on with my build. So I wanted you to understand that none of the people you're watching are perfect. I promise you, we're all making mistakes, okay? And the second thing is, I wanted you to think about how you want to be when you have a boo-boo and how you're going to approach it. All right, let's get back to work, and we need this new model kit. All right, look, this video is becoming longer than I had anticipated it being, and so I'm going to have to break it into at least 2 parts. I'm probably going to do 3 parts. 2 parts for the build, and then a third part will be a display base, okay? But for sure, 2 parts, and this is going to be where we're going to split the video in half. What I may do is, normally when I do a longer video like this, I'll do part 1, part 2, and then when part 2 comes out, I also release an unsplit version. That's probably what's going to happen. So we're going to go ahead and end part 1 here. Part 2 and the unsplit version will come out in a week, so you won't have to wait that long. But, you know, do I like splitting this right at the point of disaster? No. It just seems like the natural place to take a break and catch my breath and regroup. So that's what we're going to do. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a giant thumbs up, click subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss one of my videos. If you have any questions or comments, especially about this build, I would love to hear from you, especially like on the mistakes I made and stuff like that. Put them down below. I would love to hear from you guys. All right, that's going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I hope the rest of your day is fantastic and full of no mistakes. I hope everything just goes to plan. I hope everything goes to plan here, too. I really do. All right, that's going to do it. I'm going to get out of here. Until next time, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions saying, be good. Okay, so I have the new kit, and I'm just going through a lot of the same old steps and rebuilding it. I took the old one and just ripped it apart like a gorilla and got inside of it so I could get the cockpit out. I was able to get the stuff off the walls and reuse that. So I saved myself a lot of work there, and then just had to put all that into the new model that I'm building. And frankly, I'm learning from my mistakes. Everything is going really well. Everything is fitting together. And all of the mistakes I made earlier, like with the wing roots and the wing lights and stuff, all of those are being addressed. So it's almost time to go back to the paint booth again, and I've got all the control surfaces ready for their paint. And for the covering of the cockpit, I should have showed you this earlier, but basically the kit comes with a mask that you put around the canopy, and then it suggests you use the paint on rubbery masking solution. So that's what I did. And then it has flat out masks for the front part of the windows. And so I've masked those, glued those on with a little Elmer's, and then here's the canopy in place. I've got the foam rubber stuck inside the landing bays, and the airplane is looking just choice right now. Everything is clicking. So we're back at the paint booth. We're going to repaint again this whole new kit using, again, the AK Interactive Polished Aluminum, and it's going to look fantastic. I'm so happy at this point, but I'm also a little pensive. I'm terrified that I'm going to screw this up again, and I've already had to backtrack. So, you know, I'm trying to be a little more careful with what I'm doing, and the airplane is looking amazing. Really very happy right now. Okay, this is where we're at right now. All right, and so here's the deal. Let me start by telling you, going backwards enabled me to address some of the issues that I was having with the build itself. That fin looks terrible. I might need to touch that up. Maybe not. Okay. For instance, let me give you an example. The right wing root. It was a miracle how beautifully it fit together. I thought I had the left fine until later I noticed there was a pretty severe step there, and it didn't look good. I don't have that problem now. It's fixed and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The new finish on it, beautiful. Okay, I might need to put a little paint on the tail here because it's a little splotchy. All right, so I might need to do that. Boy, this thing looks fantastic. So yeah, I was able to go back and deal with some issues that were bothering me. But I wanted to show you this. Okay. This is a scrap piece of the original. And I want you to see it right next to the current build. Now, ignore the fact that this is a terrible paint job and just look at the color difference because it's the exact same paint. Both of these are polished aluminum. What's the difference? Well, this one was coated with a high gloss black base before the paint went on. This was coated with just Tamiya white fine primer. And this is what I wanted, not this. So, multiple levels that this is absolutely better. Let me get a piece here. Now the ancillary things, so like all the control surfaces, they were all painted with polished aluminum, and we should be able to see a difference. Okay, it's faint, but you can see there is a difference in the finish, and that's what I was shooting for. I can emphasize that, make it bigger if I want to. But those are the subtleties of doing a metal finish. So I'm really super happy with where I'm at, except for this fin here back here. I did a real bad job of getting paint on that. I may just throw a little bit of paint in there and get that going. But anyhow, what it comes down to is that I'm back in business. The model is looking fantastic now. It was worth going backwards like I did. And now we can go ahead and get back to work. All right, so I told you that one of the reasons I wanted to do a P-51 was because I wanted to do a metallic finished aircraft. And to that, I've got to offer some variation in different parts of the airplane. Now, one place that seems to be universal is around the exhaust manifolds. So I'm masking the airplane off, and then I'm going to use steel, AK Interactive Extreme Metals steel, and I'm going to just lightly airbrush around the exhaust manifolds in that steel color to change the color of that panel. It's going to come out looking really, really awesome. But that is not going to be the end of the panel work, because these aircraft, they often had panels replaced or panels that got used a lot and started to get different colors. And, you know, there was a lot going on here. So you have to change some of the panel colors if you really want to make this thing look good. And we'll show you what we're going to do here in a second. But for right now, we're going to get this masked off, head to the paint booth, and spray down a little steel. All right, that went really, really well. I can see the color difference, but hey, proof is in the pudding. We got to get this masking off, and then we can really see how things came out. But so far, so good. I'm very happy. I just used the Tamiya painting mask tape, and I built it up instead of using the blue tape. I'm trying to be as ginger with this airplane as possible because honestly, I will cry. But I'm pulling off the masking tape, and I can see that panel color. It's slight, but it's enough to really stand out and add so much interest to this build. You want to talk about Terrified? I'm going to give you Terrified. I screwed up the last part of this plane, putting a clear coat on it. I'm going to put a clear coat on this one now. I want to seal in my work before I start getting decals down and stuff like that, and weathering and panel liners and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I am just literally filling my shorts right now. But I'm using something different. I'm going to use Gauzy. Gauzy makes a clear that I can use, and it gets a lot of good comments. People say that this really works out great. It's made by AK. It's recommended for going over the extreme metals. So I'm going to use some Gauzy. I'm going to put it on this airplane and hope everything comes out well. Also, I cleaned up my airbrush really well. So we're going to lay this down and see what happens, but let me tell you something. I said a little prayer before I started. Well, the Gauzy worked great. I let it dry, and it looks fantastic, and I'm super happy. So now I can move on, and to move on, I got to come back to the paint booth. Here I'm painting. See, I changed my mind with the new kit. The new kit had a different livery that I liked, so I changed my livery. Everything changed with the new kit. So this particular livery needs yellow stripes on the wingtips, and the entire tail has to be painted yellow because it has a checkered pattern tail. And so what you do is you paint the tail yellow, and then you put these black checkered decals on there to get the effect that you want. So everything's dry. It's looking great. I've got everything masked off, and I'm painting the stripes on the wings and the tail all Tamiya bright yellow. All right, so I'm going to decal this in phases because, based on coloring different panels and things like that, I'm going to do things in phases. Right now, what I want to do is I want to get the tail decals on because I'm concerned about them. So I want to get those on now, and it's a series of checkered decals that go all over the yellow tail surfaces. And the airplanes, this squadron was called the Checker Tails. And so water slide decals, they're going to be great. And while we're doing this, we can talk a little bit about the Eduard decals because there's a lot of controversy going on about these things. People are saying they're made, excuse the light in the way, but I need to see what I'm doing. People are saying that these are made with a carrier that is meant to be peeled off, giving these a really stenciled on look. Well, Edward says, no, that's not the case. But that, yes, the carrier can be removed if you're careful, but that's not how they were designed. That's not what they were meant to do, and you could ruin your decals. So I thought about it briefly and decided I'm not doing that. I'm going to do what Edward said, and I'm going to just put the decals on like normal. If you want to try and remove the carrier, be my guest. I'm not taking that chance, especially after being this far into the second kit. I'm just not doing it. So I'm treating them like simple water slide decals, put them in place, nudge them around, get them to where they need to be, and then, yes, a lot of setting solution will be involved here. Okay, so with a lot of prominent decals put on, but not all of them, I had to go and do a little bit more painting. So what I did is I masked off and painted the green, I guess it's like an anti-glare coating for the nose of the airplane to keep the metal from reflecting light and blinding the pilot. And then after that was dry, I masked off to paint the nose. Now what I did is I just used Elmer's glue and glued the nose cone on to the airplane with Elmer's glue so I could pop it off and put the propeller in later. But I wanted to make sure it was all together so that the paint would be consistent. So I glued the nose cone on using the Elmer's, let it dry, then I masked everything off and painted the nose bright red. Now I'm just removing the masking, and this is always a point of terror and fun, because when you get it out and it comes out great and it looks fantastic, there's no better feeling in the world. But man, it comes with just this foreboding feeling that is just terrible. But look at that. Oh yeah, baby. I'm starting to get really excited about this airplane because it is starting to look good. The checkered decals, look at those checkered decals on the tail, the red nose, just everything. It is looking so cool. I could not be happier at this point. All right, you can see how the airplane is looking right now, and it looks fantastic if you ask me. I'm really, really happy with the way this is coming out. But now it's time to do a little bit more with changing the color of some panels. And for that, I'm going to use AK oil brushers. And you can use any color you want. You can use a rust color, a black color. In this case, I'm using black. And I'm using it on the panels where the guns are. Okay, these things would get a lot of work, and potentially a lot of damage, and replacements, and so there's a good chance the gun bay panels are going to be a slightly different color. So all I'm doing is I'm just putting little bitty dots of the oil brusher on those panels, and then I'm going to get a little turpenoid, moisten a brush, dry it out really well. I don't want it wet, I want it just damp. And I'm just going to blend the oil brusher into the panel. Now, you don't really need to worry too much about staying in the lines, okay? Because these are oil paints. They're going to take a really long time to dry. So you can always go back with a very, very clean brush, dampened with turpenoid, and you can clean up the edges. The trick here is, and what you want to do is you want to get that panel just ever so slightly a different color with no brush marks. You want it to look really smooth and natural. And if done right, it's going to be very, very subtle, but it's going to make a world of difference. I only ended up doing the two wings, these panels on the top two wings, one panel to the right, to the left and rear of the cockpit, and one panel underneath. That's all I did. You're not trying to make the Partridge Family's bus here, okay? Don't overdo this or you're going to ruin it. Just pick a couple select panels and just change their color ever so slightly. If you prefer, use a different paint, mask it off, and spray it if that's your thing. Now, after that's all dry, I'm going to detail all the panel lines using Tamiya panel liner. But I heard somewhere, somebody said that after they used Gauzy over the top of their airplane, the panel liner really didn't run through the panel lines. And boy, howdy, were they right. I put a little dab in the intersections and it just sat there. So I ended up having to brush across every panel line that I wanted highlighted. It came out fine. It wasn't a problem, but it definitely made a difference. So I'm just going around and putting the panel liner in all of the seams, over all the rivets, and anywhere that needs to be just ever so highlighted. I'll let it sit for just a little bit, dry up just a hair, and then using some thinner on a little piece of paper towel, I'll clean away the extra, and it should just give a really nice subtle detail and realism to my airplane. Now here you can use a Q-tip, or like I said, I'm using a paper towel, just slightly damp with thinner. The trick is you don't want to bear down too hard. You want to just kind of glide over the surface and remove the residual, because you don't want to be pulling the panel liner out of all the panel lines. Okay, that defeats the purpose. You did all that work, and the panel lines look just like they did before you started. So you got a very soft hand here. Don't overdo this. Okay. Now, I know you're not seeing all the time in between. This build took me a while to do, but in between every step, I'm letting things dry, and now I'm able to go ahead and do the panel liner effect to the sides of the aircraft. I'll also do the bottom. Everything gets the panel liner, okay? And then we can let that dry before we move on to the next thing. Okay, so with the lion's share of all the detail work done, I can go ahead and put the rest of the decals, the major decals on. We haven't done stencils yet, and it looks amazing. I'm really, really happy with the way this is looking. And the AK Extreme Metals are really selling it. I believe the metal finish. I buy it. Now, I want to show you something here. Let's take a look at this side. Look right here, and you can see the gun bay. Can you see the subtle difference in those panels as opposed to the ones around it? And then look right here, and you can see that this panel is ever so slightly a different color. All right, so everything's going really well, and now I'm going to go ahead and put on all the millions of what they call stencils. And these were things that the ground crews would spray on, little words like no step, to tell people not to stand on a certain part of the airplane, and it's full of these things. You could skip these if you wanted to, okay, because they're really tiny. But if you're really trying to do this right, you need to take the time and do the stencils. I go through the sheet one at a time. I cut them out, stick them on. It's time consuming and a pain, but it sure does pay dividends. So remember when I said I had the foam in the landing gear bays? Here it is, and I'm just pulling it out, and that just kind of protected that chromatic green that is in the landing gear bays, and I've got some in the rear bay too, but I already pulled that out. But now you can see it really coming together. This is looking pretty awesome if you do ask me. All right, so now I have to figure out the landing gear, how it goes in. I got to become really familiar with this. I have to make sure I understand the angles and the positioning and the fit and the finish, because it's really important when you're building an aircraft model, especially if you're going to show it. If your landing gear is wall-eyed or something like that, you're going to lose a lot of points for that. This is like a really easy thing for the judges to notice, and well, for anybody to notice. You know, now some airplanes, the landing gear is a little bit splayed out, but in this particular case, it looks like the landing gear leans a little bit forward on the airplane, but is nice and square. So, you know, I really need to understand everything. Once I get that, I can go ahead and paint up the landing gear, put on the wheels, and do all of that stuff. And just a side note, the wheels in this kit, they do have plastic ones, but they also included resin wheels for this, and that's what I'm going to be using. So I'm going to get all this figured out and then get this landing gear together and get it installed. Okay, so we're on the tail end of this build. I just have some minutiae to attend to. And one thing is the resin exhaust manifolds. Now, I do some things good, I do some things bad, but one thing I really do well is rusty exhaust manifolds. I got that down pat. And all I do is I paint them just a plain old brown using Tamiya paints. And then while it's still wet, I use track rust weathering powder, and I just kind of blot it on there. And it gives this great exhaust manifold rusty look. It adds a little bit of texture to it, and they look fantastic. After it's all dry, I can use a little more black weathering powder and just kind of dust the ends of the exhaust manifolds where the exhaust would come out. And man, you get such a great realistic look to these things. Anyhow, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to set them aside to dry before I glue them into the airplane. There were a couple small rear pieces that went into the cockpit area, and I left those out intentionally until now because of all the painting I was going to have to do in case the mask leaked or something. I didn't want to have to go back and deal with these things again, so I just left them out. But now that we're at that point, I can go ahead and deal with those. So I have glued them in, and I'm just painting them flat black, and then I'll let that dry before I can final install the canopy. Now, the front part of the canopy goes on pretty easily. I just kind of put a little bit of Elmer's glue on it because it'll dry clear, and I just pop it on, and it's perfect. The rear canopy needed to be stretched out a little bit, and what I found is if I hooked one side, I could take my fingers and kind of pull the bottom edge of the opposite side out a little bit and then kind of pull it down and over the rails that it sits on. So I did that, got it positioned. I'm doing it with the canopy open. And then I just tapped it very lightly with some of the thin cement, let it flow along the edge there, and glue it in place. But yeah, it took a couple tries to get the canopy in place, but once I did, I was really happy. So anytime I'm mixing materials, photo etch with plastic or resin or what have you, I will turn to my gel control super glue, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just putting a little bit of it in the slots where the exhaust manifolds go. Those are nice and dry, and now I can take and insert them into place. And I damaged them just a little bit, but it was no big deal. Just a little bit more weathering powder to touch them up, and they're good to go. All right, with those final pieces in place, I can call this model done, and now we can take a look and see what we have. is devastating Dolly in all her glory. I think she came out amazing. I love this model. I really love this model. Everybody always liked the P-51. And yeah, I'm no exception. I think it's a great looking aircraft, and it was a really fun build. I had a great time, even though I had all those little obstacles to get through. It was fun. I had a great time, and I think it came out great. And it's just proof positive of how good these Eduard kits are, because to be perfectly honest, I'm not this giant airplane model builder, but look at what Eduard allowed me to do. They allowed me to come out with this amazing model that I think looks great. Now, that is the end of the model build, but I'm going to come back with another video in which I'm going to do a display base for this. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Maybe a week or two before you get to see that. But I am going to do that. I'm going to bring it to you as soon as I can. So keep your eye out for that. But other than that, we are finally done with the P-51, and I loved everything about it, and I hope you loved this video. If you did, please give it a giant thumbs up, click subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss one of my videos. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you, especially about the finished product. How did I do? What would you have done differently? What do you think of Eduard kits? There's so much to talk about. Put it in the comments below. I love to hear from you guys. Okay, that's going to wrap things up. I hope the rest of your day is full of successful projects and smiles and great feelings all around. Until next time, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions saying, be good.